Hi everyone, I'm James, an author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. This is The Morning Edit, the show where you and I sit down with a cup of coffee and talk about all things fantasy publishing, especially from the perspective of the independent author. Today, I'm joined by Eason Blackwood, a fellow author here on YouTube who just released his short story anthology, Eidolon, which is excellent, by the way. You should check it out. We're talking about public displays of writing, different creative ways that writers can hold themselves accountable in the modern world where we all have cameras in our face. Eason does some interesting things where he kind of proclaims bold moves that he wants to make as a writer and then performs it live. NaNoWriMo just came and went, and he live streamed most of that process that he had gone through. This stuff takes a lot of courage and a lot of confidence, and I think there's a lot we can learn from Eason's process. So, without further ado, let's get to the talk. Hi everybody, I am talking to Eason Blackwood, author of Eidolon, a fantastic anthology of science fiction stories. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I'm just going to pass it over to him. Hey Eason, how are you doing? And let my viewers know who you are and what you do.
Hi, thanks, James. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Eason. I'm a writer of, I guess, mostly science fiction, speculative fiction, weird fiction. And I suppose I've really picked it up in the past 12 months or so. I spent a huge chunk of this year working on the collection, as you mentioned, which is I guess it was many, many years in the making as well. It was kind of, I spent a lot of my late 20s sort of writing it, and only now decided I'm going to bring it together and make something. But I'm also here on YouTube making YouTube videos and, writing and trying to not destigmatize the wrong word, demystify the writing process, and doing a lot of it in public, warts and all. And I guess I'm just sharing my journey, and hopefully people are interested in it and they want to come along.
Yeah, well, I definitely will say you caught my interest. I think I remember in one of your videos you said that you've been really hitting the YouTube thing hard since about January or so. That's when I kind of appeared to doing YouTube in this way. But what I was doing when I started is I was just looking up like indie authors, fantasy authors, whatever, if the self-published authors, and I was looking for channels that had less than 1,000 subscribers. And I found yours, I think in January, maybe February, but I've been tuning in since then, and I've always enjoyed your organic way of talking about things. Like you don't seem like one of these fake people that's just like performing writing. I don't understand why people do that, but I was drawn to your channel because you're just a person sharing your passion. And like you said, warts and all, I think it's extremely admirable that you've been doing these streams where you're writing just live. I don't have the confidence to do that. I get nervous if anyone's even looking at me typing, let alone like thinking about a live stream.
Yeah, well, I am with you. I'm extremely self-conscious about writing. My partner and I, he's a writer as well, and we have never read a sentence that each other has written, because it's just that kind of, there's so much of and I'm trying to beat it, which is why I'm doing these live streams, but so much of my self-worth historically I've tied up in this writing stuff, and it's so silly, it's just so I can do, there's a guitar behind me, and I've like recorded like EPs and put them up on the internet, and I don't care who listens to them, because it's not something that I'm like, it's not an identity marker, I guess, but for whatever reason something happened, and it's a big part of the themes in the book is, at some point my identity got tied up in all of this writing stuff in a really unhealthy way. And so part of the thing with the live streams is I'll do it even though I'm uncomfortable, and we'll just see what happens. And this is a bunch of stuff as keeping myself accountable and getting stuff down and just getting the words down, and so that's the reason I'm doing them. But it's definitely not through overconfidence that I'm doing these streams. Absolutely not. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes it organic. We're not. None of us are Stephen King. None of us are Brandon Sanderson. We're all normal people, and that's who I want to speak to personally. And I see what you mean by I couldn't even imagine being like in a relationship with another writer because like my fiance, she's a painter and and a psychology student, and we both our household is very much like built on the arts and the sciences, and I get so nervous whenever I show her anything. Like I used to show her early drafts, and now I'm like I just wait until like I'm basically publishing the book. The book is ready, it's pressed. I've ordered the copies. Now I will read it. And I have to get this idea of people I care about liking what I do, because taste is so subjective. It has no bearing on the quality of your work. But then I'm always like, did he like it? And if she didn't like it, then it's like I'm crushed. And I try to act like I'm not, but I am.
I know. No, I absolutely feel that. Yeah, I think and I think that's another reason I can do these streams is because like if strangers on the internet criticize you, then like who cares? It's only really the people that you care about, and I'd be able to see it as well, even if he's like, oh no, it's good. I know him so well, I'd be able to see that flicker in his eyes, I'd be able to know. But no, and this was you've reminded me actually. You talked about we're not Sanderson or whatever, but one of my all-time heroes, and this is another reason why I started doing these streams. One of my heroes is Harlan Ellison, and he like famously what he used to do. He used to hate signing books, and so he'd actually go to these events where he'd launch a book, and people would expect him to like talk and whatever. So he used to do these stunts instead, where he'd like literally carry his typewriter to the bookshop, and one of his fans, or people who come to buy the book, they'd give him a prompt, a completely random prompt. He'd sit there and he'd get his typewriter out, and he would start like typing away, and he would post each page as it was written in the bookstore window. And so people would walk past the bookstore, and there'd be this queue outside as they're eagerly waiting for the next page. I mean, he really was a genius. Like he could write amazing stories fully formed in an environment like that, and I am so far from that. My stuff, it's rough when it comes out, and it needs to be polished and chiseled. But that was one of the big things that inspired me. I was just like, it's a really cool thing to do, and also it means if you generate these prompts and you generate them weekly, all of a sudden you're not very precious about these ideas. They become throwaway. One of the struggles I've had this year is doing that second part, is doing that polishing and working on stuff, especially for stories where I love the idea and I'm like, oh, this is a great idea and I can see this being an amazing story. And that's almost like too much weight. It's almost like too much pressure. And so having these prompts where it's like, I'm going to generate another one next week anyway, so I can just turn up, I can put something out and we'll see. That element of disposability has become quite important to me in terms of getting stuff done.
That's really interesting. I'm probably on the other end of that, where I find myself super attached to concepts to the point where I am more willing to completely redo them from the ground up than I am to start from another idea. Like they say ideas are cheap, and I agree with that. But then like I have been stuck on the same concepts for the last 6 years of my life. So that maybe that's something I need to adopt into my rotation when I get away from bigger projects, because I've been wanting to write more short fiction. And the problem with short fiction for me is like, so my last like really good short story I wrote, I had that idea a year ago exactly, and I didn't write the story until 10 months after I had the idea, but it was just like percolating the whole time.
Yeah. I'm much more, what I will usually do is I'm much more likely to get an early first draft done. So there's a story I wrote right at the start of the year, and I watched a film and I had this idea, and the idea came to me fully formed. And I literally thought, this is one of the best ideas I've ever had. This is going to be brilliant. And not only that, often like a lot of times I'll have an idea. My ideas are more they're more sort of thematic, or they're visual, their feelings, their vibes. They're not stories, but this was an idea for like a story, which was just, this is great. I loved this. And so I could get a first draft out, I could get through it. But the problem is, like, the idea is perfect, beautiful, shining thing, and the first draft is this ugly, deformed monster, and then all of a sudden I've got this gap to bridge, and I think that's where the difficulty has been for me this year is going back and saying, all right, how can I bridge this gap here and make this a bit closer to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first draft is always harder than anything else in my experience, just because it is that time where it's not living up to your expectations, and there's no real way for it to be, unless you're that guy who's typewriting masterpieces on the fly. But they are definitely not.
So few of us are that guy.
Yes. So I'm curious. So you're going to do NaNoWriMo. Is that going to be one of those throwaway prompts, or do you have an idea already of what you're going to do?
I have an idea. I've been reading. I love sort of science fiction from like mid-century science fiction. I love the kind of like 40s to the 70s, like that sort of era, like Heinlein and things like that. And he's got these like juvenile books that are like science fiction with like young teenagers, usually like 14, 15-year-olds that are like the stars, and they go on these big adventures. And so it's kind of like YA, I suppose, before YA became what it is today. And so I wanted to do something like that, because I wanted to keep the characters straightforward. I wanted to keep the plot simple, because I've never been able to write. I've attempted it many times. I've always failed. I always get mired in it. So I was like, I'm going to write my own version of a kind of juvenile sci-fi adventure. And so, yeah, I plotted it out. Or I'm partway through plotting it out, but I'm plotting it out very, very meticulously, so that when it comes to it, I know it at every corner where I'm going. Hopefully, as long as I don't change my mind. So yeah, I've got a strong idea. Like, I've got my characters. I know what they're about. I've got generally the plot that I'm putting together, and so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that happen. And if I remember correctly, you're just gonna live stream that whole process.
Yeah, it's I've got this personality type where it's like, if I went to the doctor and the doctor said to me, look, you're lacking vitamin C, you're a vitamin C deficiency. Some people would hear that and they go, well, I need to eat more oranges then. But I would hear that and I go, okay, I'm going to eat one orange every day for an entire year, and that's going to be my promise to myself. And I'm going to make a chart, and I'm going to tick it off on the chart. So it's like, so this YouTube thing is similar to that. Like, I feel like if I don't take big swings and I don't make goals for myself that are ambitious and then I can get excited about, then I won't do it. And the live streaming thing has just been good more than anything else, and that's what I use YouTube for as well. In a way, is just to keep myself accountable. So it's like, if I say online, even if it's not to too many people, that all right, I'm gonna live stream writing a novel every single day in November, and it's gonna happen, and these are the times, then I'm probably going to, if I don't do it, it will feel bad, So I'm probably going to do it to the best of my ability. So that's kind of how I operate.
It's self-inflicted peer pressure.
It's self-inflicted peer pressure. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it means that sometimes falling off feels worse. And sometimes, you set such high ambitious things that it's so much easier to fall off. And people say to me all the time, why don't you just do a bit, or why don't you just do a little bit? And it's like, that's just not the way I operate. Broad swings, or it's nothing.
I There's a lot to that strategy. I mean, we live in a world full of, I was just talking about it earlier, just full of creators. Everybody's a creator. Everybody is trying to do something special to stand out. So the only real way to stand out is to do something that nobody else is doing. As far as YouTube goes, it seems like every writer now needs to have some sort of online presence. During my undergraduate doing creative writing, we had a whole class that was just about building an online platform because it is seen as that essential to where they're literally teaching this in school. Uh, how has YouTube affected your writing? Do you feel like being in an online space, you said it kind of keeps you accountable. Is it generally a positive addition to your process, or do you feel like maybe like you're spending more time writing videos than your fiction? What's the balance like there?
I at the moment I'm in a good place. So I mean, at the moment I'm in a good place with it, but this a similar thing that's so this really relates to what I was just saying because, like I said, I started the channel in January, and in January, rather than saying, "All right, I'll start this YouTube," I'll dip my toe in the water. I say to myself, "I'm going to make 3 videos every week for the rest of the year," which is insane. And so I start off, and it's like this is going great, and then it becomes like 2, and then it becomes 1, and then I decide I'm going to put a book together, and then I don't appear again until August or whatever. And so that's kind of how it went. At the moment, I'm in a better place with it because I have just got more of a routine. I have these like Sunday videos that I do, which are just one take and there's barely any editing and they just go up and that's fine. And then I have one video that I put a bit more time into, but usually still I'm trying to, those ones are like a bit more scripted and I'm trying to tie that into writing as well. So often I'm trying to write like an essay a week. Again, another self-inflicted rule, and so they then are becoming the YouTube videos. So I kind of know what's coming up. So at the moment, I'm in a nice routine with it, and so it's fine. But I do get overly obsessed. I do wake up thinking, "Oh, is there more comments? Oh, we got another subscriber. Oh, I did this. Oh, I did that." And it's like I do find myself reaching and thinking about it, and I don't necessarily. I don't dislike that, but it does sort of become another distraction at times, which is why a key thing I'm doing here is tying it to my writing. So doing the live stream, so that's more content, but it's also more writing. Doing that Wednesday video, but it's also an essay that will eventually go on my website when I finally get that sorted. So I'm just trying to be I'm just trying to use it more. Yes, it's a tool for promotion, but I'm also trying to use it as a tool for productivity, if that makes sense.
I think that makes perfect sense.
Content to the horizon, whereas maybe your ambitions are broader than that. Weirdly, I have I have an opposite story. So I did a YouTube channel when I was at university. A friend and I, we did a YouTube channel about comic books, and our story was completely different. So we grew to around 2,000, I think, but very, very slowly. And we did 3 videos a week, almost nonstop for about 18 months. But he did film at university, so he had a friend who was an editor, so we never had to edit anything, which is my least favorite part. And so we did this thing, and we started like growing this community very, very slowly. And it would just trickle up, and the graph was going up, but especially toward the end, but it was going up slowly, and you'd find like repeat commenters and things like that, even to the point where I'd go to like a local comic convention and someone would go, "Oh, you made the videos." So that was like the complete opposite thing, and I really believe we were doing it in the right way, and it's one of the the regrets of my life that we stopped, that we didn't make more of an effort to continue that when we left university, and we kind of we sort of things change, and it becomes more difficult. But I feel like that's the way to do it. You almost don't want that big viral video because it puts a lot of pressure then on that type of content, and you're like, all right, that's the thing. So maybe I've got to make that stuff, and I just think the reason people will stick around is for you. Not you want people to stick around for you and your personality because they're invested in you rather than whatever this thing was that took off, I guess.
I was just thinking about this earlier on my drive home. Like, we think so hard about being viral and just appealing to so many people because we see these big giant channels of people getting rich and they have millions of subscribers. And then looping that back more to writing, like we see these big bombastic writers, like Brandon Sanderson's my go-to because the guy is just ridiculously successful for a fantasy writer in this day and age. But then I started researching Kickstarter, which is how I'm going to be funding like a lot of my projects going forward. And I've seen Kickstarters do extremely well. 4-digit numbers, 5-digit numbers, 3-digit backer counts. You can make something really wonderful happen with just 150 people who believe in you. And that has been more of my strategy and more of my outlook on like the topic of YouTube. I don't need thousands and thousands of people. I just need like a good, solid niche community that care about me, right? And I think that's where most of writers like us on the internet are going to find their audience is through a small amount of people who are willing to support them. And the only way to really gain that is consistency.
Like I said earlier, the way I'm finding that consistency is just making sure that everything I'm making is just tied to my goals anyway. So I mean, I had a video, one video I've made so far a couple of weeks ago that was like not a video I would ever usually make. It was like coming up a lot, and I was seeing this topic, a book in a genre I'd never read, and something I'm just not part of that. But just a few things annoyed me, and so I was like, I just wrote about it, and then that turned into video, and that was the thing. And then all of a sudden, I do find myself thinking, oh, am I going to have to read this book now? Maybe we should do another one, or should I put the thing in the thumbnail? It's like, no, we're not playing that game. It's just so silly, and you'll be disappointed, and then you won't be happy with the thing that you made. So for me, exactly what you said with your audiobook, like the things that I'm putting out, the things that I'm uploading, I'm just like, I'm happy for them to be there. I'm happy to be like, this is, a visual diary. It's a memento for me in the future, or it's an essay that I wrote that it's like a visual version of that for people if they want it, me ranting and sharing my opinion. So that's the way I'm trying to just keep it together, I guess, and keep that consistency, and hopefully it works out.
Thanks for sticking around to the end. I have at least one more talk with Eason where we talk more broadly about Eidolon. Links for that are in the description, by the way. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like and subscribe. We got more coming. I have at least 2 more author talks with 2 different authors coming later this month. And in January, there's a whole new series coming out to help the new writer become a writer in 2026. All right, folks, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day.